Hello and welcome back to the Joe and Toby Talk podcast, where we haven't done it for a while, but we are back. We've been talking a lot about cricket lately with the Ashes and all of that, but Toby's been having some internet issues. Hopefully they're all resolved. I'm sure he's going to catch us up on all of that in a little bit, but lots to get through today. We're going to talk about the Ashes as a whole. Obviously that's finished now. We'll maybe have a little look ahead to the Cricket World Cup. Obviously not a lot of things to say about that right at this moment, other than a couple of big talking points. And of course the return of the Premier League season, and in particular where we think some teams might finish and that sort of thing. But without further ado, I will introduce my wonderful co-host, Mr. Toby Jones. Would you like to catch everybody up on the drama at Jones HQ?
No, I'm only joking. Hopefully I sound okay. Well, I think over the last couple of weeks I must have met every Tom, Dick and Harry that works for Openreach. The amount of cables that have been replaced is quite stunning. I'll keep it brief, but we started having internet issues, I guess, just after we'd done the final podcast, I suppose. Actually, not the final podcast. We did a separate video, which was on my Toby Jones channel as a bit of a plug, which was a review of the concert we went to see a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
But anyway, we started having issues like intermittent dropouts for a couple of minutes at a time. So notified that there was an issue and got Openreach out, and they came and they saw there was an issue about 40 metres away, which was a couple of houses behind us. So they got up the ladder, replaced the wire, hunky dory. That's all sorted now, sir. A couple of days later, of course, it starts again. So they come back. Oh, there's another issue, because they come to the main box and run tests. There's another issue about 50 metres away, so they changed that wire. A couple of days, great. Then nothing. And then they come back again for the third time of asking and decide to shut one of the roads to take a cable out about 70 metres away. I don't think they've got any nuance of what they were doing at this point. And after that didn't work, they got rid of the one engineer, obviously thought he was no good, so they sent somebody else on the fourth time of asking. This is about 2 weeks later, and he said, well, there's another issue about 40 metres away which I'll go and look at and I'll let you know. And then on the afternoon we had a ping from Sky that the issue was resolved. And then a couple of days later it started playing up again, and I thought, this isn't resolved, and miraculously it's now resolved. So I won't complain. But that is the main reason why we haven't done a podcast for the last couple of weeks. And it is a crying shame, because we got into quite a good routine. Good routine from my point of view anyway, because I'm dreadful at keeping up with these sorts of things. But
yeah, no, absolutely.
It's a rather good time to come back, isn't it? Albeit we missed the review of the last Ashes test, which in fairness would just been a lot of moaning about rain delays and how we should have won the Ashes and all that nonsense. But I think after a few weeks to reflect, we can be a bit more generous and calm about the situation. But I've only had a couple of days to recover from you saying that Forest to be relegated, so I'm still getting over that one. I was very upset at that, and I inherently disagree with your suggestion that Forest will get relegated. So
I'd expect nothing less, Toby. So, but
well, let's talk about cricket first, shall we?
Yeah, obviously, we did an in-depth review of tests 1 to 3. Test 4 at Old Trafford will forever be remembered, I think, as the rainy test, if you like, the one that could have been and maybe wouldn't have been, where Australia could have still won that test match, however unlikely that might have been, or it could have been a draw. It has to be said, and I think it opened up a discussion around about that test, about how cricket is kind of behind the times of all other sports in terms of if there's a bit of rain, it can bring about no result. I think for the World Test Championship, they did have a reserve day. They had a day 6 planned in case there was any rain delays, and lo and behold, on the Monday morning it was bright sunshine, and you would have had a full day's play on a day 6, and it opened up that discussion. I've not seen a lot come of that. I would like to see more come of it. Obviously, it's a different sport, but tennis has in most of their big tournaments now got a roof on the main courts. I'm not suggesting that is a possibility for cricket, mainly because the stadiums for cricket are very strange, really, compared to most sports. So I don't think a roof is the answer. But there has to be something done, I think. Cricket is absolutely fine to have draws. I think that's fine. Where I think it's not fine is when we can have no result to a test match. Obviously, it was a draw in this scenario, but in ODIs, T20s, it would just be a washout, match abandoned, and it doesn't get replayed. And quite a few times I've actually had tickets for cricket matches. It's been completely washed out, and that's that. You don't get another chance to go and watch that, and that would not happen with any other sport. Football, if a match is abandoned or cancelled or whatever, it gets rescheduled. It gets postponed, is what we say, for waterlogged pitches, frozen pitches. So there is that sort of backstop, if you like. I don't know what your thoughts are on this, Toby, but I was calling out for a Duckworth-Lewis type method, actually. I think, obviously, we've got that in the one-day and T20 game. If rain affects an already started match, they'll rely on the Duckworth-Lewis method and be able to determine what the result would have been. And I think that could be something they use in Test cricket, and it may well be that they come up with, well, this match would have been a draw, and that's fine. But yeah, what are your thoughts on this?
I think the clear reserve day is an obvious idea. I don't see any issues with that. Maybe some logistical issues, but not really, not enough to provide any excuse for not having one, especially when there is a risk of rain. I know they're not always right, but there are such things as weather forecasts. So
yeah.
If
we knew
the
that
5
was going to be
days
an issue,
shows
didn't we?
Yeah. If the 5 days shows completely dry, then it's almost disaster planning to put a day 6 in. But for most English tests, whether it's January, August, or December, there's always some chance of rain, usually, whatever time of the year it is. So a reserve day makes complete sense. My biggest frustration, and seems to be the frustration of a lot of people, is you would get an hour to play. So you would have rain up to midday, and then it would start raining again at 1 o'clock. Rather than going out at midday to play, or maybe 12:15 once the pitch has dried a little bit, all the rest of it. They make this decision, and this was done on a couple of occasions, not just lunch, but general delays with... At 12 o'clock, it stopped raining. Right, what we'll do, now it's stopped raining, we'll take an early lunch and then go back out again at 10 to 1. Everybody else knows that by 10 to 1, it'll probably be raining again. And sure enough, 5 minutes before the start of the session, it's the heavens open. And it's like, well, you've just missed an opportunity there. And it's not that precious that, we've got to have lunch at 12:15. The players have been sat inside for the last hour, so there's not that excuse. I think that's the biggest frustration that we have. I think it's I don't know if it's a rule or if it isn't, but once they kind of say, right, we're going to start playing, I don't know if it's for 30 minutes before they actually go out, but I don't see there anything stopping that. I mean, maybe 10 minutes, like they would with a Grand Prix or something like that. It's going to be a 10-minute delay, but having a minimum 30 minutes just to get booted up, I don't understand that. And I think that was something that could have potentially led to having, I don't know, 3 or 4 half an hour, 40-minute sequences, which would have won back 2 or 3 hours and possibly might have forced a result.
Yeah.
So
no, absolutely.
That's the biggest frustration. I think that a day 6 is an obvious one, like we've said. Your Duckworth-Lewis method's interesting, but I think the key thing is whether they are trying or not to make Test cricket bigger, to have a 5-day sport that can still, obviously it can end in a draw if it's controlled like that, but to have a 5-day sport that can end in a draw is ridiculous. Yeah, just think about it. I mean, 90 minutes watching a football match at 0-0's enough. Never mind 5 days of watching cricket. Knowing by about the 4th day, this is petering out into a very dull draw. But you can kind of accept that. But the weather aspect of that, you can't accept it. Whether it's England or whoever it is, it just takes away the value altogether. And for such a big series like the Ashes, I think when it's kind of a standalone one-dayer or something like that, something that's not part of a championship, a friendly game or whatever it is, it doesn't matter particularly because it's got no value. But to effectively decide an Ashes series, it's frustrating at best, isn't it? Really.
Yes, I mean, as you were talking there, I've never really had a problem with the concept of a draw in cricket. However, I mean, a little idea that came to my head there would be perhaps a test match could become a bit of a point scoring exercise in that, say for every 100 runs you score, it's a point, and for every 3 wickets you take, it's a point, and then whoever has the most points at the end of those 5 days gets the victory. And you could still have a tie in that case, and that would sort of help out those situations where you've got a team that are just batting out a draw. I'm talking about Anderson and Panesar 2009. England had no right of getting a result out of that match. Australia were the better team and probably deserved the win, if you like. And under a points-based system, maybe they would win. Do we need draws in cricket? Because it brings about the confusion of a 5-match series being tied 2-2. That's confusing. Yeah, and I think if cricket wants to appeal to everybody, then perhaps it needs to have a bit more black and white about it. Okay, England won the series 3-2 on countback or something like that. I mean, I think maybe you could bring those points-based scenarios in if the match is weather affected. Whereas if it plays out the full 5 days and it's still even, then you call a draw there. I don't know. I think something has to be done. I think the other talking point is the over rates. They're meant to bowl 90 overs a day. That's what's meant to happen. It's what always used to happen. It seems since the introduction of DRS and the concussion things for the batsmen, drinks breaks, lots of drinks breaks and slow drinks breaks. They're only really playing 75, 80 overs a day now, which if you tot that up over a series, it's almost 2 innings probably that we're losing over the course of a series because of slow play. I think one solution for beating the weather, if you like, would be actually bowling the 90 overs, because so many test matches do not last 5 days now. So if you're bowling the right amount of overs, then you'll probably get the matches in, rain or no rain. So I think that's another thing to think about. I don't know how you get around it other than if you're 15 overs short on one day, you add them onto the next day, or you take time off, or they start earlier, finish later. I think that cricket is very rigid, and it's a bit ridiculous that they start play at 11 o'clock in this day and age. Why is it 11 o'clock? Why aren't they starting at 10 o'clock and finishing at 7? It's a bit of an odd one for me.
It's tricky, isn't it? Because if you made, say, one exception, then England went and won the Test match, it'd be, well, they've just altered the rules to suit England. But and on that occasion and throughout the summer, there's no reason why you can't go on till 8:30, 9 o'clock.
Yeah. And I think it's not about that series. That series is done now. A bit like Abu Dhabi 21. You know, people still hark on about that, but ultimately you've got to learn from what was, I think, a mistake and made cricket look bad and made a lot of people confused in a summer that I think attracted a lot of interest in cricket and could have really built on that momentum and maybe, you know, brought about a new generation of cricket fans. It sort of petered out because of some silly rules that cricket have. And I think something needs to be done so that in 4 years' time we're not having the same conversation, realistically. But whether it will or not, I don't know.
Unfortunately, I don't think anything will change. But because that's the way it's been and that's the way it'll carry on. I don't see cricket as a very vibrant's not the word, but particularly Test cricket.
Progressive,
very, as you say, rigid.
It's not progressive.
Very rigid. No, I agree with that. But you know what? It was apart from that, it was a great series. I think in the end, I think 2-2 was a fair result.
Yeah,
I've heard a lot of people say, and I think you'll agree with me on this, that a lot of people have said that, well, Ben Stokes shouldn't have declared in that first test. That's what lost them the Ashes.
No,
and people keep forgetting that they were 7 down at this time. They probably would have got 50 more runs maximum, and on the last day, Lyon and Cummins would have probably still got them. So it's not an such obvious thing that people say, well, England threw it away. I don't accept that. But I think the way it ended 2 each, obviously Australia retained it because they won the last one, but from where England have been the last couple of years to where they are now is tremendous progress, I think. And I came into the series my usual pessimistic self, saying that they'd be found out by Australia, and I think actually the opposite happened. Australia weren't found out as such, but they were very sort of nonchalant about Bazball, that didn't really think it would make a difference. Well, from the first day it made a difference because Australia's field settings, all of it was reactive to the Bazball. There's no question about that. And it made the series more exciting as a whole. Whether it did lose England a test match at one point, maybe it might have done with some of the aggressive play, but I think, as you've quite rightly pointed out, if you play tippy-tappy cricket, we haven't got the quality of cricketers, not the quality in terms of their talent, but the defensive qualities to put up with that either. So ultimately, it wasn't Bazball that lost it. I think Australia were probably just the better team overall, but as I say, I think 2-2, probably a fair result. It's just a shame. We've got to wait 2.5 years now till the next one, isn't it?
I think there'll be a very different 25. England side as well that go down there. I think, as you say, 2-2 is a fair result. I think England could have won it 5-0, to be fair. I think England had maybe the first 2 matches in their hands, if you like. Obviously,
it could have gone 5-0 either way, which is quite ironic.
Yeah. The third match at Headingley, Australia could have easily won. I mean, we won by 3 wickets, I think it was, in the end. It looked like it was going to go the other way. So I think on balance 2-2 is right. And hopefully we can go to Australia. I think actually Australian pitches will suit Bazball quite well. The aggressive style of play, I think, where England need to massively improve, and I think they were found out a little bit this series is with the ball, and I think this series in particular showed how reliant they have been on the brilliance of Jimmy Anderson over the years, and with Jimmy Anderson not being at his best, anywhere near it, I think we were found wanting a little bit with the ball and not being able to get those key wickets. And Chris Woakes played out of his skin, but he's not going to be able to do that in Australia, in my opinion. Stu Broad obviously gone. And yeah, where is that new talent with the ball? Josh Tongue is there, Matty Potts, of course, but that's the one area I really worry for England. I think we've got a pretty solid batting lineup for the next 5-6 years. I don't see that changing very much now, other than perhaps Bairstow. I don't think he'll get unlimited time in that position. But other than that, I think I think most of those will be around come the next Ashes. Don't think Jimmy Anderson will be.
No, you're absolutely right. But I think this is the same problem England had at the other end of the order when Strauss and Cookie went. Obviously, Strauss long time before Cookie went, but it's took them 5, 6, 7, even longer to replace those two. So it might just be a thing that we have to wait for the talent to come through from a bowling perspective and hope that where the bowling has carried us previously, the batting can start to carry us in the future. Ultimately, you just have to be amazed at the quality of Australia, thinking about their bowling lineup and their batting lineup as well. They've got two of the three best batsmen in the world. They've got the best fast bowling attack in the world. So whether England can match that when they go down under, it remains to be seen. But it's a long way off yet. And that's it for the Test action, isn't it? This year we've got no more tests until early next year now. So
and realistically, that's the last accessible cricket that people will have for quite a long time. I believe BT have still got the right, or TNT it is now, for the away test matches. So unless Channel 4 do a thing where, last time Channel 4 I think got the rights to the away series in India, so maybe they'll be able to do that again. But it's Sky Sports is expensive, but I think a lot more people have Sky Sports than have BT, and I think having visibility of cricket is going to be important over the next 12 months. But one thing that is happening, obviously, the Cricket World Cup, and the defence for England starting up. It's an interesting one. I think that you look at the squad and it's not too dissimilar to the one that won it 4 years ago. Obviously, notable omission is Owen Morgan, who of course was the captain, but Ben Stokes seems to be a bit of a yo-yo, or doing a bit of a hokey-cokey, I think, when it comes to international retirement for one-day internationals, and he's for me, disappointingly announced that he's going to be playing in the World Cup today. And for me, I'd rather he went away and sorted himself out a little bit. There's a big gap until the India Test series, and I think if he managed to get his knee sorted, even if he missed the Indian Test series and he was back next summer, for instance, I think it's better for England that you've got a fit Ben Stokes than Ben Stokes, who might or might not help us win a World Cup. But long term, for me, I don't know if that's the right decision. But of course, it's up to him. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that, Toby.
Not particularly. I think that I think he's looked at it probably that it'll be his last World Cup, because I can't see him playing in one days in 4 years' time. Yeah. So that there is that element to it, wanting to retain that. So I understand that to a degree, and I think that if you look in terms of priorities, the top Test series is the Ashes, and you've got the Cricket World Cup, which is kind of the next discipline. So for him to miss out on potentially India next year as a result of going to the Cricket World Cup, I don't think that's going to bother him massively. Yes, he's the England captain, but apart from the World Test Championship, which still isn't something with massive prestige, I don't think, it makes things interesting. But I think my point is that he's going to be allured to a Cricket World Cup rather than just not a meaningless, but a Test series that has a lot less meaning or prestige to it than a Cricket World Cup. So I understand that.
I have to disagree with you there. I think an away series in India is actually one of the big events for England cricket, and I don't think he's going to have that time away now. I think this was the opportunity for him to have surgery or whatever it was. I fully expect that he will be there after Christmas in India. Hopefully he plays well at the World Cup. It would be a bit embarrassing if he doesn't. He won't bowl, which, you know, I mean, you've got to look at his quality as a batsman, and I guess he's going to go straight into that England team. You'd be a bit miffed if you were in that England setup and he gets your place, because he's been retired from one day as on and off over the last few years. He reiterated as recent as 2 weeks ago that he wasn't going to come out of retirement. So it is what it is. I mean, do you think England have got a good chance at winning the World Cup again?
To be completely honest, I don't know how. Don't follow the one-day international cricket that much. But apart from, I love the World Cup, particularly the last one in England. But mostly after that, I don't follow one-days that much. But if the squad's not changed that much, we're very strong, albeit on home soil. With it being in India, you know, one of the strongest teams, obviously, that'll make it interesting. But to be honest, if my spot was took by Ben Stokes, I don't think I could argue. I understand that he's been retired and he's walked back in, but if you just think of some of his performances in that magical summer of 2019, I said I hadn't got a prop, but we'll bring it back for the second time.
Oh, here we go.
Summer to remember. That summer to remember. Ultimately, he's got to be back in. So, yeah, I agree with some of the sentiments of what you're saying, but I think surely if he gets to the end of his career, is he going to look back on a second World Cup win potentially, or a win at an away Indian series? I know personally which one I'd pick. Yeah. No, I completely understand, and well, fingers crossed we can do well in the Cricket World Cup, and hopefully we'll get good visibility of that on the TV as well, and really get behind England, and also, you know, watch some of the other nations, some of the smaller nations that don't necessarily play Test cricket, like the Netherlands. I know Ireland do play Test cricket now, but I think Ireland have qualified. I might be wrong. Scotland, of course, traditionally World Cup teams, so I'm intrigued to see all that happen, and Cricket World Cup's always a good time. But any final things to say about the cricket before we move on? Well, we're not a cricket podcast anymore. After this minute, cricket's gone. We're not a cricket podcast anymore. Well, maybe apart from a bit about the World Cup, but we're going to go back to the other sports, because cricket's been the summer sport, hasn't it? And football's been away for 3 months. By the way, England women are in the final. Hey! Well, yes, I was going to ask you about that, Toby. You're absolutely fine supporting the England women, yes, but you do not support England men. So, yeah, it's a weird one with you, isn't it, Toby? But no, I watched that match in full this afternoon when we were recording this, playing against Australia. I was worried when Australia scored, because Australia were very much on top in the match. I thought, that's it now. Australia will go and win this. But to England's credit, they did well. Funnily enough, I thought it was a very Southgate-esque performance. They went 1-0 up reasonably early in the match, and then sort of sat back. They didn't look for that second. No changes made, no substitutions until very late on in the game. And I think it felt very much like a Southgate performance to me. And I was like, oh my God, if this was Southgate right now, Twitter would be going mental. You know, if this was the men's hang on. Football team. How many tournaments has Southgate won?
Well,
listen to the crickets. Listen to the crickets.
You said it wasn't a cricket podcast anymore, Toby.
Well, we've gone back to it. I'm fed up with football, but no, I must confess, honestly, that before this World Cup. And I'm not a convert, I'm not a big women's football fan now, don't get the wrong picture here, but before this World Cup I watched a bit of the Women's Euros, but not a lot. But I've really enjoyed watching England in this World Cup, I have to say. They're a brilliant team in terms of the togetherness. The manager is excellent, and if she goes and wins on Sunday, we'll have an incredible record. Finished second with Dutch in the last World Cup, won the Euros of England, and then went on to win the World Cup with England. So incredible stuff. And just looking at that squad, obviously with Jill Scott retiring after the Euros, that it's a squad that has struggled at least so far up front. I don't think it's necessarily been a Southgate type of play. In that they've been too defensive. I just don't think they've had the firepower up front. But they did really well to get free today. And let's see what happens on Sunday. But you know what? They won games tightly. I guess you could call it the old Mourinho method of just getting across the line. But if you go and win the tournament, whether you've breezed through your games or won all of them 1-0, nobody will really remember that. I remember Argentina won the last World Cup, didn't they? And lost to Saudi Arabia in the early stages.
In the very
Saudi
first
Arabia
match.
becoming.
I
Saudi
remember that with Spain many years ago as well. I think 2010 they lost their opening match to Serbia or something like that.
Switzerland, I think.
Switzerland, there you go. So
they were Argentina. I think they were definitely the second team to have gone and won the World Cup after losing their first game, which was, as you say, after Spain in 2010. So, as I say, however you win it doesn't really matter. But it was. It has been great. The only parting note I will say about the women's football, it's quite a shock. I think it was it Friday? I think England might have played Friday last week. I can't remember now. But whoever I was watching on Friday last week, I watched those on Friday morning, and then I sat down to watch Burnley and Man City on Friday night, the men, and it's like going from watching non-league to serious stuff. And that is no offence towards the women, or no meant offence, if you like, no intended offence, but the intensity of the Premier League when you compare it against any other football, in fact, European football, bloody Saudi football, is incredible. And that's why it's so good that it's been back, and I've loved it the weekend. Apart from you saying Forrester's going to go down, because you're never going to live that down. But I guess you were quite happy.
Well, I will live it down when Forest do actually finish 19th this year. So there you go.
Forest will be fine. I mean, they nearly beat the supposed way fair title favourites, supposedly. Arsenal are supposed to be these.
I think saying nearly beat is a bit of a stretch, but I get what you're saying. I think they very much nearly beat Arsenal in the same way that Wolves nearly beat Man United. I think it's first game of the season. We'll see. Forest proved me wrong last year. As I say, I don't think they will this year. And if you've got no idea what we're talking about, Toby keeps referencing my Premier League predictions video that I did over on my channel. Something very, very different for me. I have actually gone and purchased a camera now, so maybe I'll do more of those things. But if you're going to say bad things
about Forest, you can forget it.
Yeah. Yes. It was funny you said about the non-league. I watched a load of the football over the weekend. It's probably the most football I've watched that hasn't been international football for a long time. I've been well up for the new season, and I watched Portsmouth versus Exeter City last night, just flicking through the channels late at night, and it was dreadful in comparison. So I think exactly what you said. I think it wasn't so much an offence to the women's football. It was just, wow, the Premier League is amazing, and anything else just looks terrible in comparison. I think compared to 10 years ago, just one final thing on the women's football. I used to find it quite painful to watch sometimes, particularly the goalkeeping. I think that's what's really come on over the last few years, and it's going to, as it gets more popular, the quality is going to increase, and it will happen as money is thrown at women's football, which it inevitably will be, regardless of whether England win or not on Sunday. I think especially if they do win, there'll be a lot of inspiring of a generation. There already has been with the last year or so, and I think the quality has massively increased of women's football, and it can only get better. And I think that's where England are at as a team, actually, as a women's team. They're in a bit of a transitional phase. Some of the older players are still there that have been playing since the Olympics, so it's a very impressive job what Serena Wiegmann has done. I can't help but think that she reminds me of Sven-Göran Eriksson a lot. And I think Sven is the third best England manager of all time, but he might go down to the fourth best England manager of all time if Sunday's result goes the way we want it to. But no, well done to the Lionesses. They're certainly showing the men how it's done, I think, is one way of putting it. And it's just a good time to be an England football fan at the moment. Both men and women are doing very, very well. The under-21s won the Euros as well. So, I think we're in a good place with English football. And so we should be with the Premier League the way it is. And I think a lot of good English players at top quality Premier League teams is helping that a lot. But Premier League was back at the weekend. Obviously, all 20 teams were in action, including the 3 promoted teams, Luton, Sheffield United and Burnley. What were your thoughts on those 3 sides? I mean, that's I think that's where we'll start, because of course Burnley opened the season against Man City. Now, I've heard people hype Burnley up to no end. People saying they're going to finish in the top half. I don't see it myself. I don't see how Burnley have made so much progress since the Sean Dyche days that they're going to be a top half Premier League side. And certainly nothing I seen on Friday night convinced me otherwise.
The problem with that whole top half idea is that probably since, when did Burnley finish 7th? Maybe 6-7 years ago now.
Yeah.
The Premier League is a hell of a lot stronger since then. It's so hard to come up and stop up in the Premier League. Tricky to assess Burnley because they played against Man City in the first game. I thought they gave as good as they got. It reminded me a bit of a Brentford style of play that they didn't just sit back, and I think that's the way you've got to play against these top teams, because if you've got nothing to lose, you might as well just go for it. The best you're going to do is 0-0, but against the likes of Haaland, you're going to concede at some point. And if that was their game plan, Haaland scored within 3 minutes anyway. At least I've got him in my dream team this year, so that softens the play slightly. Yeah. But
and so have 95% of people playing Fantasy Premier League, I think. But
I looked at that. I'm not surprised. I mean, I don't know what the other 5% are doing, whether they're just in it for a laugh. But surely you've got to prick Haaland and De Bruyne. But obviously not De Bruyne now, because he's out for 4 months. But what Burnley didn't have, which is why I've picked 3 of 6 teams to go down, which I think you probably agreed with the 6, and we'll touch on those when we go outside the newly promoted sides, is they haven't got the firepower up front. And if you don't score goals, you don't win matches. It's as simple as that. I'm not going to get all classic pundit line, but it's a fairly obvious concept. But if you can't score many goals, the most you're going to get out of matches is a point. And I think it could have been 3-1, maybe even 3-2. Burnley had at least one or two clear-cut chances to score against Man City, but didn't have the firepower. But out of the 3 promoted sides, by far the best performance. Sheffield United played against Crystal Palace and lost 1-0. The most entertaining part of the game is then when Roy Hodgson nearly had a scrap with one of the players. Yeah. Good old Roy at the tender age of 76, just still showing everybody how it's done. I think it was a little overhyped for what it actually was, but we'll have a bit of fun with it. Sheffield United look bereft of players. I think there's only 6 out of 11 that have been promoted that are still there. That's fairly normal course because you lose players through loans and all the rest of it, but they're a club that haven't invested, and whether it's a money issue or just tightness issue, that's why I have to praise what Forest did last year. As much as people thought it was stupid and maybe a bit over the top, if you are going to get to the Premier League, particularly as Forest, who haven't been there for 20 odd years, you invest to make sure you do your best to stay in the Premier League, because it's so hard to get up from the Championship. To go into it and kind of give up at the first point of asking is just a bit stupid, really. But as for Luton, well, they were dreadful. Yeah, could have easily been double figures for Brighton. And again, Luton's a tricky one because Brighton are a tricky side to rank because they did so well last year, and maybe they're going to have, ironically, a bit, not so much, but we all remember Sheffield United had a great season when they first came up and then got relegated. I don't think it's going to be that far for Brighton, and Brighton have got European football, but Brighton are another team that's going to be difficult to rank these first couple of games before everything gets really started. But that being said, Luton were just wide open, and I think if they keep getting beat 5 or 6 or 3, 4, 5, it's going to demoralise the players very quickly. What you need when you come up in the Premier League is points quick. I remember with Forest, the first 12 games last season, they only got 5 points, and I think everybody thought they'd gone. And Forest probably had the players coming through and Steve Cooper moulding the squad together to bring that about, but if the similar thing happens to Luton, I can't see them recovering from that. But on the positive side, it's great to see Luton here. I don't think anybody is backing them to stay up.
Except me.
But that's. I mean, Forest to go down and Luke to stop up. What a stupid prediction. Yeah. That's about the 4th time I've mentioned it. But you know what? It's one of those things that's so ridiculous it might just happen because there's absolutely no pressure on them because everybody thinks they'll go down. So if they're not being battered 3 or 4 every week, that's good for them. The problem for them is that there's no easy games in the Premiership anymore. You don't go to anywhere and think, oh, an easy 3 points here. And even with the sides that have come up, maybe Burnley are a step above Sheffield United and Luton. But I think this year it could be a clean sweep for who goes down, because if you look at who stopped up, 2 of the new promoted sides, Forest and Bournemouth, those are 2 of the 3 I was placing in my relegation fight. The other side was Wolves, and I know you said that Wolves nearly beat United and you weren't that impressed, but my God, I
never said I wasn't impressed. I'm just saying, let's not get carried away.
I think people including myself then, are getting carried away with Man United because Man United were awful.
Yes.
I think that anybody, if that was Brentford or Brighton or Villa, 3-4-0.
I think easy. I think that the thing for me, right, Erik ten Hag, this time last year, they lost the first 2 matches very comfortably under Eric. And I think people got very carried away about how good a season Man United had last year. I think they were very, very fortunate that Tottenham, Liverpool, Chelsea had pretty terrible seasons by their standards. And, they didn't finish that far. I mean, they finished a couple of points ahead of Newcastle. They didn't finish that far ahead of Brighton or Aston Villa. Realistically, Man United didn't have that good a season, and I think it's skewed a little bit by the fact Man City had a little bit of an off-season last year. I say an off-season. They still got 89 points, but that is compared to 99, 98, 100 and whatever. So they were about 10 points down on where they were last season. So United were a bit closer to that than they would have been. I'm not convinced by Erik ten Hag, and this might be a famous blunder of mine. Somebody timestamped one of our Tuesday Night Lives a few years ago, and both of us said this about Max Verstappen, about how he was equal with Carlos Sainz, and neither of us were particularly convinced that he was world champion material. Yeah. So it could well be Erik ten Hag might lead United to an invincible season. They might win the quadruple this year, and people might be coming back to this video and saying you are a muppet. And I would agree with you in that instance, but I cannot see that happening. I think the hype is too much for Erik. I think they've not been a very good side, actually, for many years. I think they actually improved a bit under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. They actually finished second 1 year under him. But I just don't like their recruitment.
Really? Okay.
I like Højlund up top. I think he'll come good. This summer they've done all right in the window, but it's been a failure over many years. I think that the Fellainys of this world being brought to Man United a long time ago. I don't think they've improved much from that level of signing. Casemiro is obviously a good player, but he's old. He's not going to last forever in midfield.
He is, but then Thiago Silva's 39 and he's an absolute rock in Chelsea's defence. I don't want you to take the FM approach of when they get to 25 they're too old.
No. I mean, you know me, Toby. I am all for signing a 37-year-old striker. I'm fine with that, but I just feel United's recruitment over the last few years has been dreadful. I think they've improved a bit this summer. They need another couple of windows to be anywhere near where Man United should be, in my opinion. So yes, they were pretty awful against Wolves. They still won. They were pretty awful. But I think that's par for the course for United over the last 12 months. I think people were getting very carried away. I think after 2 matches, they were saying, wow, Erik ten Hag's going to beat Frank de Boer's record here, and he's going to be out the door by the end of August. But he got a third place finish in the Premier League. Should have been fourth, really. I think Newcastle should have finished third last season. Yet to be convinced.
Interesting. I do think it was definitely just an early season thing where they looked a bit lethargic, but I think on the other hand they definitely underestimated how good Wolves were going to be. And whether that is a new manager bounce with Wolves, it's very difficult to tell. But the back line and the midfield played brilliantly, but Wolves have such a lack of firepower up front, which is why I put them in the relegation battle. They've lost Raul Jimenez, who after his head injury hasn't been the same player.
He looks okay for Fulham the other day, but
yeah, he did, ironically, but he's not going to be the level of Mitrovic. I'd be amazed because I don't think he'll ever be the player that he once was. Similar to the whole Stuart Broad scenario, really, in cricket with his batting. But the big talk with Wolves is that Fabio Silva's come back from his loan deals, the famous youngster that signed for 35 million a couple of years ago and has done nothing, been out on loan and done decently. So he's the only potential saving grace. But I do worry a bit for Wolves. But I think that, you know what, with Gary O'Neill in charge and what he did with a Bournemouth side that, like Luton, everybody had written off, I'm a bit more positive about Wolves now, because it seemed they played very much in the Bournemouth style of play that they played last season, and it served Bournemouth well. So yeah, I think that that Wolves might just be all right. And with that 6-side group, there's I can't see it, but there's always one that you don't expect. Maybe an Everton, maybe a Fulham, that do slip down into that list. I don't know.
Everton were okay. I mean, they were creating chances, but again, recruitment has been non-existent for Everton, really. When Dele Alli is the biggest player you've signed over the last 2 years, I think that says a lot. I just don't understand that the bottom half of the table sides this year, I think any of 10 could go down, to be honest. I think anywhere up to West Ham, really. Crystal Palace, we're assuming they're going to be solid, but they'll probably just about do enough. But I honestly think it's going to be incredibly close in that bottom 10, and you get on a bad run at the wrong time, and I think you're out of it. I suppose the saving grace for the likes of Everton could be if people are right and Luton are, a 10-point season club, and maybe Sheffield United are a 15-point season club, and then it's 1 of 8 rather than 3 of 10. That could be the saving grace for a lot of teams this season, I think, because the recruitment side of things for the bottom half of the Premier League hasn't been good, and people don't seem to be spending money. A few years ago there was lots of money flying about, and I know there's this line of financial fair play in the case of Everton, in the case of Wolves, and I really know where that's come from, because it's not stopped them in the past. So I'm not really sure where the money's going. We're getting more and more record TV deals. There's meant to be more money than ever in the Premier League, and nobody seems to be spending other than Chelsea. Maybe all of the TV money has gone to Chelsea. That might explain it, because literally my phone, I can't remember if it was today, maybe it was this morning, yesterday, but notification, BBC Sport, Chelsea have signed. They've spent about 300 million in the last 48 hours, and it's not done yet. I think they'll probably spend another 300 million at least by the end of the window. I'm baffled by it all, Toby. I'm not going to lie. Remember, Chelsea were a bottom half club last year. They were a bottom half club last year, and they have spent nigh on 600 million since January, if not more, to be honest. I've really struggled to keep up with it. But why aren't the likes of Fulham spending money? Why aren't West Ham spending much of them? They got 100 million for Declan Rice. I think they've signed about 60 million pounds worth of player, but nobody's really investing. And I just don't understand it. For that reason, I think a lot of teams are going to be in trouble this year.
I equally don't think there's much point throwing money at nothing. I can understand in the Everton perspective. Wolves, I've got a problem with financial fair play, definitely. Everton, I can kind of get. The likes of Palace, though. Palace have got some very good players coming through. I think they've got more than a solid side to come through. I think that they lost Zaha in the summer, but they've got Eze, who could rise to the occasion, albeit Michael Elise, he's funnily enough potentially going to Chelsea,
I think. Yeah.
Chelsea!
What's this, something like 25 million? I'm like, this is crazy money. But 25 million seems like a bargain, because Chelsea have just absolutely blown 110 million on Caicedo, which I just don't get.
I'll tell you where the first problem comes from. The midfielder market has been blown open massively by Declan Rice going to Arsenal for £100 million, because there is no way in my mind, and I'll keep saying it, and I don't care about being proven wrong, Declan Rice is not an £100 million player. He's a good player for West Ham, but is he a top player? I'm yet to be convinced. I don't think he is. So for him to be valued at 100 million, for me, he's probably a 50 or 60 million pound player. So then when my club, Liverpool, had supposedly had a bid accepted for Moises Caicedo for 115 million, I didn't want him. I know that Liverpool need a midfielder, but I thought that is a ridiculous amount to pay. Fortunately, Chelsea came and saved the day, and then they've gone and signed another midfielder that Liverpool were after, Romeo Lavia from Southampton.
This is the other thing. What on earth is going through Caicedo's mind that he joins Chelsea over Liverpool at this point?
Wages?
Possibly, yeah, possibly. But, Chelsea have done this for years and years and years. They sign, they'll have 40, 50 people in their squad. Half of them will go out on loan. I mean, Lukaku is still a Chelsea player. That is what's bonkers about this situation. Why is Caicedo not going to Liverpool, where he's going to presumably get 30, 40 games this season in that Liverpool squad? I think he's the type of player that will fit straight into Liverpool, because that's exactly what they're looking for. Chelsea have about 100 different options for Caicedo's position. It doesn't seem... I mean, I'm just thinking about the football manager aspect of this, trying to register that squad, Toby. I mean, how the hell do you register that squad? There's certainly not 8 English players in there. So, you're already down to 23, 22. So, it's... I'm baffled by Chelsea. I'm baffled by this line of financial fair play for so many clubs when it's not really been an issue over the last few years. Wolves have, got rid of a lot of good players, not brought anybody in. I know Gary O'Neill was asked about it on Sky, and he just sort of changed the subject. He never said anything. So,
but Wolves spent 185 million last year, which you might not think is massive, but they spent that amount of money. So ultimately,
you got to be careful.
Wolves' biggest problem is they had the chance to sell Ruben Neves last year for 70 or 80 million, was being quoted, to United and other clubs. They should have took it while they could, because Ruben Neves is probably, in my mind, a similar price range, maybe a bit lower than Declan Rice. So in today's market, for Neves to only go for 40 rather than the 100 that Declan Rice went for is ludicrous. Now, if they'd have got double the money for Neves, they wouldn't have had to have raised as much money on additional transfers of other players. So Wolves did spend the money. They have spent the money in previous seasons, but maybe they have invested well. I think Matheus Cunha was their record signing in Jan from Atletico Madrid for 40 odd million. So from a Wolves perspective, they have invested. It's not like all the fans can cry and say, well, we haven't spent any money for 3 years. Well, I think that another degree to this as well, which people are forgetting, is financial fair play is judged on a 3-year rolling graph. And obviously in 2020 to 2021 season, we were impacted by COVID. That didn't help match day takings and all the rest of it. I know that TV money is a big thing now, but why this doesn't affect the big clubs as much, obviously, is that Champions League or European football brings a massive amount in, and that's what could hurt Chelsea if they're out for a sustained period. But I'm not going to explain it, but I don't like the guy. But Simon Jordan on TalkSport did a very good overview of how Todd Bowley is beating the FFP rules, and that was very interesting. If you're interested in economics, if you're not and it bores the pants off you, then don't watch it. But all I'm saying is, what Chelsea are beating the system and doing quite a good job at it. But
I mean, it's only going to go one way for Chelsea, isn't it? And it's none of them end well, I don't think. People criticise Roman Abramovich, but I think we're in a very different scenario with Todd Bowley. And, he had 3 managers last season. Don't think Abramovich ever had that, to be fair. 3 managers in a season. It's an interesting season to come for Chelsea. I do fancy them to finish top 4, actually. I think because they've got no European football, I think that's going to be massive come the end of the season. But rather than ranting on about clubs at the bottom, which team impressed you the most this weekend? And if your answer's not Newcastle, then you're banned from the podcast.
Chelsea.
Yeah.
Obviously against my lot, Liverpool, and for the first 20 minutes Liverpool dominated, and I had a little wry chuckle and thought this is going to be easy, and then Salah's second goal was ruled out, and it was, oh, okay. and Chelsea played excellently from then onwards. Liverpool couldn't have a kick, so I was massively impressed by them, and I think that Pochettino will start to get them going quite quickly. Something I did see on Twitter, which I thought was quite funny, that I think a Chelsea fan had commented that they said, I think we should be pushing top 4 this season. Somebody commented, well, you spent the best part of £1 billion, so I should bloody think you're pushing for top 4 this season. I mean, who spends that amount and then doesn't think, and then thinks, Champions League might be tough? It's a ludicrous situation, isn't it? But I think Newcastle would be the obvious answer. You know what? I think that Newcastle were maybe flattered slightly, and I think Newcastle played really well. But I think that Mings going off really hurt Villa, because Villa were very much in the game up to that point at 1 apiece, and then Villa holding this high line, I don't think he's going to work, particularly not with Tyrone Mings in the squad. So they were all over the place.
I don't think away from home,
No. So if you were to ask me what player impressed me most, I'd go with Tonali, because he's fit straight into Newcastle's team, hasn't he? He looks like a really good signing.
Yeah, well, he's your classic football manager signing, isn't he? He's somebody that for years and years has always ended up at Man United or Man City and is there for years and is one of the best players in the world. And time and time again, I've seen him on Fantasy Premier League and I thought, is he going to actually be good? But my word, he played terrifically. And I think you're right. I think Aston Villa were very, very poor, particularly towards the end of the game. I think they'd given up, which isn't a good sign on the first day of the season. But, I think Newcastle probably deserved 3-1. 5-1 flattered them. I mean, Newcastle were playing really well the first 10 minutes or so. They obviously got the early goal. Villa very swiftly got back into it. Quite poor defensively from Newcastle there. And I think that's what worries me about Newcastle. As good as their defence was last season, I still see Dan Burn at left back, and I just can't see how that's a Champions League left back for me. I like Botman. I like, Cher's okay, but again, he's from the Steve Bruce era of Newcastle team, which very much weren't fighting for top 4. Very, very different time. I think the rest of the team has improved. Obviously, Isak is a top quality striker. What will probably end up being one of the best strikers in Europe eventually. Midfield is getting there. I think Barnes was good when he came on. Anthony Gordon really impressed me, actually. I wasn't that convinced last season of him, but he played well.
Normally.
but for me, I don't know if you agree as an outsider looking in, if you like, but defensively, particularly left back, I think is where Newcastle need to prioritise over the next couple of weeks while the transfer window's still open. But I've not heard anything really in that regard. No.
I think in fairness though, they've bought well everywhere else. They haven't gone and spent the earth. I think they've been quite shrewd about it. I
think Tierney was talked about, Kieran Tierney from Arsenal, but I don't see that happening now that Timber's injured. So
no, not at all. But I think they are very much Eddie Howe signings, not the best players, not marquee signings, but players that can be developed, and I quite like that. I quite like that approach to things.
Yeah, they haven't gone and signed Ronaldo and Mane and N'Golo Kante, and I'm trying to think of anybody else. Ronaldo, all of those have gone to Saudi, haven't they? So they haven't gone and done that, which they could have done. And I think they have bought well and bought youthful, I would say. Not youngsters, but players in their early 20s that will only get better. So I think that's a very good approach. Maybe where Chelsea are just buying everybody. I think that is their tactic, is to buy. If you buy everybody's players, then you won't be playing against anybody decent, and you'll win the league by default.
That's a terrific shout. That's how Todd Bowley is beating FFP. Yeah. Trust me, that's exactly the reason why he's beating FFP. But moving on, I think that the only talking point we haven't discussed is life after Kane.
Yeah, Harry Kane. Yeah, I mean that was a shocker. It only developed really about a week ago, I would say, that Bayern Munich were interested in Kane. It sort of came out of nowhere. Obviously, they negotiated personal terms with Harry Kane first. I don't know how that's allowed. That was always known as an illegal approach back in the day on Football Manager, when you were able to do that. But yeah, I mean, it was just quite ironic, really, that he went. It was all rushed through so that he could play in the Super Cup final, whatever it was, and to get his first ever professional trophy. And Bayern Munich were absolutely hammered by Leipzig. So I do feel sorry for the man, but it's an interesting move. I don't think that's him gone from the Premier League forever. But will he be a success in Germany? That's a big question. I don't know.
It is an interesting one. I would feel for him if for some miraculous reason that somebody else goes and win the league this year, because that would be quite ridiculous. But I think that the time was right for Kane to go. I think that I think
it was more than the time, really.
Yeah, the new gaffer Postecoglou, or Stephen Hendry, as I said to you the other day. I think he won't be glad in a short term sense.
Yeah.
But I think in a long term sense, it will be quite a positive thing for Tottenham. It's happened with a lot of clubs in the past where there's been one player that's overshadowed things, and once they've gone, it's calmed everything down a little bit. But I think Spurs' position in the traditional top six for now is gone. I think they've probably, for the moment, been replaced by Newcastle, I would say, in that traditional top six setup. I think they're very much probably in no man's land, dependent on how good the likes of Villa, Brighton and Brentford do, really. But I think they're not going to be quite good enough to get in that top six, but I hope Postecoglou does good, because he looks like an all-round decent guy, and we all like nice guys to do well, don't we? And I think that ultimately what he needs is time.
Yes, yeah.
And I think, fortunately, with Kane going, inadvertently, it provides an excuse to give him time, particularly if Spurs don't go and sign a striker. You know, the whole thing in Football Manager, when you get to the board meeting and they go, why haven't you got the results? Well, there's been loads of injuries. Well, Postecoglou can say to Daniel Levy, you didn't buy me a striker. That's why.
Yeah.
And I know Spurs have got Richarlison, but he's not a top-level striker. But he could have the opportunity to be one. But I think that the problem for Spurs is, obviously, they've got a good amount of money, 100 million for Harry Kane. But you can't buy Harry Kane back, or the equivalent of Harry Kane, for 100 million. So I think they will struggle a bit this season, but I think in the long term it will help Spurs out. But this season it'll be a transition, which I think it's going to be for a couple of teams, and that's why.
Well, a bit like Arsenal a few years ago, really.
I think it is going to be Man City, Arsenal and Man United that are out ahead, because Man United may be slightly behind, but I'll still maintain my prediction that United will finish second behind City. I'm still not convinced about the whole Arsenal project. I know some people think they're going to win the league. I'm still not convinced, but we'll see. But
I think a lot is dependent on if Arsenal can play the way they did last season. If they can, then they'll finish second easily. I think, at least. They were awesome at times last season, but the hardest thing is keeping it up, and that's what Man City have been so good at. That's what the likes of Liverpool and Chelsea have not been so good at. I know Liverpool had a few years where they were at a very high level. Chelsea did the thing where they used to win the league and then have an off season, then win the league off season, and it's so tough to be relentless in the Premier League, and that's what's so impressive about City. They could win 4 in a row this season, which has never been done before in the Premier League era. So that's an interesting carrot that's been dangled on top of them. I was just looking at the Tottenham managers over the years, and over the last 25 years, since Chris Hughton actually had a caretaker role in 1997, no manager has been there more than 4 years, other than Pochettino from 2014 to 2019. Harry Redknapp was there for 4 years, 2008 to 2012, and the next best is Martin Jol, who was there for 3 years from 04 to 07. So I think you're absolutely right in what they need. It is time now, and I think a good 3-4 years to build something, build a project, build his team, because there are some really good players in that Tottenham team, and you can mould that team into a really top quality side. You know, a bit like Eddie Howe's done at Newcastle. You know, he's made players better. If Postecoglou can do that, bring in a striker that can get you some goals, then Tottenham should be all right, I think, over the next few years. But their problem is that Newcastle and the other 5 teams at the top, they're investing and are getting better all the time. So if you want to be in that conversation of winning titles, then Tottenham need to do the same.
Yep.
Which, I don't know if you remember back this far, Toby, you would have been very young, but when Arsenal got a new stadium in 2007, they had a few years where they had to sell their best players, like Fabregas and Van Persie and Adebayor and Nasri, you know, all of those players. And Tottenham might be going through a bit of a similar phase at the moment, because obviously they've got their brand new stadium. I think it takes a few years to really secure yourself financially again after something like that. So that's something to consider going forward. But it should be an exciting season. I think City will probably win the title quite comfortably again. I'm not sure they'll win the treble again, though. They might win the Champions League again, but I don't. The domestic cups, are they going to realistically care about those as much? I'm not entirely sure. I think last season it was a fluke of the draw, really, that they managed to get through to the FA Cup final quite comfortably and win that in the end. And I don't think that's something you can sustain every year because of the nature of the FA Cup and the nature of the Carabao Cup.
Yeah.
You know, they could face Liverpool away in round 3 and go out there because they're playing a top quality side in round 3. Whereas that would never really happen in the Champions League. That's why I think they've got a better chance of winning that. But you got anybody you want to watch out for this season in terms of teams who are you tipping to maybe surprise a few?
Forest.
Definitely. Where are they going to finish? Where are they going to finish?
Definitely surprise you.
Yeah.
I don't know, actually. I think that it is early days. I think that the usual suspects have kind of... I feel like a lot of the predictions are very heavily weighted on last season. The whole Villa thing is very heavily weighted on last season, and obviously Arsenal as well, being up there. So I think
Chelsea
there
not being up there.
That's true, yeah. I just think Sunday accepted, because I think if you take everything off the first weekend, it'd be pointless as well. But I think Chelsea will have a transitional season. That's why I wouldn't have predicted them to finish in the top 4. But no doubt, Europe will help them. You know what? I'm going to go with West Ham. Certainly based on your last year's performance, I feel like a big improvement should come from West Ham this year with the quality of player they've got. And talking about some of the midfielder prices, to have picked up Ward-Prowse from an albeit relegated Southampton
30 million
adds something to that squad. And that they've got some real stars at West Ham. I think Jarrod Bowen's an excellent striker. Obviously they've got James Ward-Prowse now, but they've got quality pretty much everywhere.
I would have liked to have seen Harry Maguire go there. I think that's exactly the. I think he gets a lot of stick actually that he doesn't deserve. But I wouldn't actually mind Newcastle going in for Harry Maguire. I think for the sort of money that was being touted, 30 million. I think a lot of teams could get a lot of mileage out of a Harry Maguire type player.
Yeah.
So I was a bit gutted to see that he didn't go to West Ham. I thought that was a perfect place for him, really, especially the way West Ham play. But again, they've got Europa League football this season, so that's a big ask, I think, for a team that small to go and perform in the top 10 again, and I think that's what might get Brighton as well, as you've alluded to. But there's lots of interesting stories. I think my team to watch would possibly be Luton. I don't think they were as awful as people were making out. Brighton are a very fast attacking side, and I think that's almost as different as you can get from the Championship is a Brighton side that will just come at you like a ton of bricks. I think there will be times this season that Luton can go and get some points, particularly at home, because nobody's going to like playing there. And I think a little bit like Stoke many years ago. Stoke obviously made the Britannia an absolute fortress, and nobody liked going to Stoke. So that's what teams have got to do if they want to be successful, in my opinion. So keep an eye on Luton. I'm hoping that they prove everybody wrong and sneak out of the bottom three in 17th place. I was tipping them to be a bit like Hull City, but going by the first day, I'm not sure that's actually going to happen anymore. But I'm going to stick by it. I'm not going to change my predictions. But I'm looking forward to it nonetheless. Speaking of which, I think we've exhausted our conversation for today, Toby. I'm sure we will be talking a lot about the football this season. I will leave the link to my FPL league that Toby's joined with Diaz Another Day, or Diaz Another Day. And you can join that. You can see how you get on against our teams. I had a pretty good week. I think I was 23rd or something, so I'll take that.
Well, you see, I had a bit of a poo-poo because I started with a 4-4-2 formation and then realised I could change it round now to a 3-4-3. So that's exactly what I've done, and hopefully that will provide some more points. But I've got Emerick Laporte in my team, who seems to be another one who's off to Saudi. So that might be a transfer I might be doing. But looking at this, I'm I got rid of Martinez. Not quite joined bottom.
Got rid of Martinez in goal and put Onana in there instead. I feel like Onana's going to get more points just because he seemed a bit more involved in everything against Wolves. But
I'll try and keep my team up to date. That's all I'll try and do.
Yeah, well, I'll be back to work in about 3 weeks' time, and it'll all go down the pan, I'm sure. But it's fun while it lasts. We've got plenty more to talk about. I'm sure we'll get into more of our other topics as well. We don't just talk about sport round here. We do delve into other topics now and again, and I'm certainly looking forward to doing that going forward. So hopefully you've enjoyed the return. If you've got any thoughts on today's podcast, then do leave a comment down below. I know people usually do. Tell me I'm a muppet in 3 years' time when Erik ten Hag has won 3 consecutive Premier League titles and Max Verstappen has closed in on Lewis's record. And he's on 6 world titles now. You can tell me all of that. And when Judd Trump has won the next 3 World Snooker Championships, tell me I'm a muppet. Please do. I'm asking you to do that. But anyway, leave a like if you've enjoyed. Subscribe so that you don't miss any more of the Joe and Toby Talk podcast. And we shall see you on the next one. Bye for now.